Namaste and welcome. Thanks for joining me for another asana a day. Today we're going to do the pose you just saw me in, Pārśvottānāsana. And the translation of this pose is the intense side stretch. So it actually really intensely stretches the legs and the chest. So, and you will notice the position of my arms. That's pretty intense too. But we're going to break this pose down, and we're going to really focus on the legs and the hips, get you a good, firm, stable base. And then we'll also look at some things you can do for the shoulders and arms to prepare the arms for that position, which is basically namaste behind the back. And it's not required. It may be something you don't even bother to ever touch, but there are some different things you can do to kind of open up the shoulders to prepare for that, but also some alternatives of how you can use your hands. So we're going to look at all those. We'll do the shoulder part last. So what you might need today, good to have a sticky mat, a couple of blocks, a chair, you might need a blanket, and a belt or a scarf or something like that you can use like a belt. Okay, so let's first look at the foundation of the pose, the legs and the feet. One of the first issues that people encounter when stepping the feet apart is the stretch on the back calf. That making this nice wide step and getting the heel anchored is problematic for the ankle and the calf muscles. So why don't you try this with me? Just stand in Tadasana, facing the short end of your mat. Feet hip width and shoulder hip width and parallel. All right, so if you've been following my videos, you're probably pretty familiar with this. We want the ankles underneath the knees, directly underneath the hip sockets, all right? And then the feet are parallel, not turned out. So as you stand in that position and just place your hands on your hips, we'll step one foot, let's say the left leg, since that's what I chose, straight back out of the hip, meaning I'm keeping that foot in its own lane, and my front foot is where it was, in its own lane. And I'm not trying to place my feet as if I'm standing on a tight rope, right? I'm not walking my left foot over to the left. That's a first point for stability. And safety for your sacroiliac joints. Then, in terms of what's going on in this back leg, just feel that out. How does this feel? Is there a lot of stretch? Will your heel go to the floor, right? Let's try the other side. So to come up, just bend your front knee, lift the back heel, and see if you can push down through that front heel and bring your leg back up. If you couldn't, you can hop that back foot up just a little bit so that you can come back out of that pose with stability. But you want to start working on that. And some of my other videos will feature how to work on that. Okay, so let's do the other side. So let's take the right foot back. So taking a nice step back, keeping the foot in its own lane. The right foot stays on the right half of the mat. And I turn the heel in a little bit and place it on the floor. So we want to see if we can anchor that back leg. It's as if this leg is just shooting like an arrow out of this hip and into the floor. Right? So if you cannot get that foot to the floor and it's kind of up in the air, which is going to make you more wobbly, I have a solution for you. So bend your front knee, press down through your front heel, and if you can't get the power to step straight back up, just hop that back foot up a little bit until you can bring yourself back up to standing. So we think of a yoga pose as like that's the pose, but going into and coming out of the pose is also the pose. And it's really great to develop that control of movement and that we're not just kind of stumbling into and out of a pose. So pay attention to that and work on that. Here's my solution for the back foot. There are actually two things I can think off the top of my head. The first one, I'm just going to take a towel or a blanket and I'm going to roll it up so that when I step back, you have to have the right distance, I find that support, right? So my heel has something to push down into. So I can be anchored. And over time, I develop the flexibility in the muscles of the lower leg, the ankle flexibility to be able to anchor that foot without the support. But in the meantime, the support's great because I can really activate the legs in the way that they would if the foot went down. Another option would be turn your sticky mat and be against the wall so that as you step apart, this heel can kind of push into the wall behind you. It's a really great way to practice the pose because you have not only the floor under the ball of the foot, but the wall under your heel, and you can push into it to develop the awareness of what that back leg is doing, right? Because you're taking your whole body forward over your front leg. You want that back leg to do its part and keep you stable and anchored. Okay, so use that support if you need it. And let's come to the short end of the mat. Place your hands on your hips. And we're going to step back with the right foot first. So pressing that front foot down and stepping the back foot back directly out of its own hip. And as you anchor down through that back leg, this leg is very dynamic. I'm pressing the thigh back. I'm reaching down through the heel. We're then going to fold forward. So as I begin to fold forward, you may then find, lots of intensity in this front leg. So an option is to go to a countertop. Place your hands on the countertop or grab a chair, and you can use this height underneath your hands as you step back, anchoring through that back leg, pressing down through your front foot, and come forward. All right, I wanted us to try that with our hands on our hips. First of all, to explore the flexibility of this leg and kind of see what happens. But also, as we move into this pose, our hips are facing this front leg, right? So we want to make sure that they're not turned out. When you come forward with your torso, you will find that if there's a lot of tightness in your hips and legs, a lot of restriction, that the hip of the back leg will pull back. This will be moving into a place of greater ease for you. But we're pulling out of the alignment of the pose. So if you have your right foot back like I do and your left foot forward, you're going to press down through the left foot and reach the left hip back toward the wall behind you. And then pressing down through your back foot, your right foot, draw the right hip forward so that you're leveling the hips off. And I want us to just check in with what's going on with that front foot. Notice if your weight tends to drop to the outer foot or the inner foot. For many people, if there is a lot of restriction here, the foot will start to drop down through the outer foot, and the inner heel and the ball of the big toe will come up. So let's press down through the inner heel and the ball of the big toe. Roll your left hip back toward the wall behind you. Press down through your back foot evenly and draw the right hip forward. Good. Take a breath or two here. So we're going to come up by lifting that back heel up and step back up toward the front foot in Tadasana. Just notice how that feels. You'll feel very unbalanced, asymmetrical, because we only did one side. But it really gives you a chance to see how that feels. As we do the other side, I'm going to demonstrate that with the chair facing this way. So you can just step right back with your left foot, but I'm wanting to give options for many different people at many different levels. So another way to come into this is to bend forward and hang onto your chair, or you could be at a higher level like the countertop or the chair back, and then step your left foot back, right out of its hip. So you have this nice wide step. The feet are in line with their own hips. And if you haven't tried to drop your torso down too low, you have a chance to begin exploring how we're using the foot and the alignment of the hips. So we're going to just check that front foot first. Make sure that you're not letting your weight, and I'm exaggerating here, but if you look at your feet, you might see you're putting more weight on the outer foot. So reach down through your inner heel, reach down through the ball of your big toe. You could even try to lift up your toes and maybe press the big toe down. That'll really activate the foot in the way that we want to use it. You can let the toes rest, but we're still working the foot in this way. And then as you press through the inner heel, the ball of the big toe of your front foot, reach your right hip back toward the wall behind you. Press through the back foot evenly as much as possible and draw your left hip forward. So the hips are level in this pose. And without taking the torso too low right away, the way I demonstrated at the very beginning of the video, we just want to give ourselves time to work out the proper alignment and awareness and intelligence moving through our legs, our feet, our hips. So take a breath here. And as you're ready to come up, two options. One would be bend your front knee, stay holding onto your chair or your countertop and bring the back foot up. The other option, a little more challenging for balance, is to press through the feet, bring your torso back up, bend that front knee, press through the front heel, and come back to standing. Good. So just stand in Tadasana for a moment and notice how this is feeling. This is a fabulous pose because you may be feeling this. It really wakes up the legs, it activates and enlivens the legs, it opens up the hips and brings a lot of fresh energy moving through the hip area, which can get really locked up and be a place where we kind of get blocked. So hopefully you're feeling that freedom of energy there. So we're going to repeat this again, and I want to use I'm going to move from using the chair as a support to the blocks. You, of course, use what is appropriate for you. Maybe just being up at a countertop doing the pose. Maybe using a high support from a chair or the seat of the chair. I'm going to move this out of the way, though, and demonstrate with the blocks. So if you have two blocks, that's great. You put them on either side of your mat like this, and you will stand in between the blocks. Good. So as we begin, let's start with our hands on our hips, and we're going to step the right foot back. Remember that if you can't get your heel down, use that support underneath your heel, or you can be doing this at the wall and step back to the wall. Anchoring down through that back leg, strong, dynamic back leg. The thigh is pressing back. We're going to come forward. And as I come forward, I'm drawing my lower belly into my back body. As this is a forward bend, it's a flexion of the spine. And as this pose gets deeper, that drawing the belly into the back body becomes more and more important. So as you come forward, let's review all the things with the legs. We want that front foot to be balanced, right? Don't let the inner heel, the ball of the big toe, come up. Try lifting up your toes. Try keeping your toes up, but bring the big toe down. You can let your toes relax, but still use your foot really dynamically like that. Press your back foot into the floor, and then let's take a look at the hips. The left hip, your front hip, should be reaching back toward the wall behind you, really lengthening that front leg. Your hip of your back leg is coming forward so that the hips are level, right? And I'm going to demonstrate what unlevel looks like so you maybe can recognize this if this is what's happening to you. If things are restricted and tight, the hips end up doing this, right? And then we rotate our torso to come into the pose. So we want to bring the hips level, draw the belly up into the back body, and begin to curl forward. Now, as you saw me demonstrate at the beginning, I didn't have my hands on anything. They were behind my back. So here we want to begin weaning ourselves off the blocks. We're using blocks to focus on what's going on with the legs and hips. But we want to really bear the weight through our legs so that our hands are light, right? That we want to meet something for now until we develop that strength and stability in the legs. And in the meantime, we can just kind of be noticing like how much weight we're putting into our hands. You may really need to do that in the beginning as you work this out. But over time, you're developing more and more lightness in the hands, more and more strength and stability in the legs. So let's come out of this side. Push your feet down, breathe in and come up. Bend that front knee, step back. Just take a moment in Tadasana to observe how this feels, the residue of the pose. And then we'll go to the other side. So we'll step the left foot back into its own lane, right? So have plenty of space for my hips because I'm not standing on a tightrope with my feet. I'm anchoring down through the back foot, pressing the back thigh back, draw the belly up into the back body, supporting that lumbar spine as I curl forward over that front leg. Breathing. You keep the belly drawn up into the back body to create this flexion from your tailbone all the way through to the crown of the head. The legs are dynamic. You're pressing down through the inner heel, the ball of the big toe of that front foot. You could try lifting your toes. Try pressing the big toe, just the big toe down while the other toes lift. Reach your right hip back toward the wall behind you. Press your left foot down and draw the left hip forward. Not excessively, but just so that you are well aligned. And once again, I will demonstrate what happens if you are not doing that. The left hip reaches back, the right hip kind of crunches in, and then the torso is distorted, okay? So this will happen if you go too low. So you may need to come up higher in order to unwind that misalignment in the hips. Good. And then just check in with, can you begin weaning your weight out of your hands and doing the weight bearing with your legs? Good, so we'll come up. So pushing the floor away with your feet, with an in-breath, bring yourself up, bend that front knee and step the back foot up, standing in Tadasana, and observe how this feels. How are your feet meeting the earth? How do your legs and hips feel? Is this affecting the state of mind? Good. So now let's take a look at the shoulders. And I'm just going to move the blocks out of the way. We will come back to the whole pose right at the very end, but I do want to just work with the shoulders for a moment. The first thing we're going to do is actually an exercise on the floor, laying down with the knees bent. You could put something under your head if you like. And the arms are just slightly away from your sides, so not way out here. And then I'm bending the elbows and letting the palms of the hands face each other. So in order to place the hands in this prayer position, namaste, that we use for namaste, behind the back, the shoulder blades have to really be able to press into the rib cage. So we're just going to kind of prime the pump and develop that tone and that awareness, the proprioceptive awareness of what the shoulder blades are doing with this exercise. So we're pressing the floor down with the upper arm bones, or you could think the elbows. Push the elbows into the floor. Push the floor away. You'll feel your shoulder blades waking up and kind of hugging up into your rib cage. Now, see if you can see what's happening. Are you activating a whole bunch of other things? Like, can you keep your face soft, your jaw, your tongue, your belly, right? None of those things need to be jumping into the picture. If you can just sort of isolate this action of pressing down through the elbows and feeling your shoulder blades hugging your rib cage. And then you release, you can just take a little rest. Take a breath. And then let's try it again. So palms facing each other, fingertips pointing at the ceiling. Push the floor away with your elbows. Wake up the entire upper back. Keep activating. Push as hard as you can and make sure that you're letting your belly stay restful and your face and your throat. If you tend to have a forward head position in your normal posture, or you have sort of a kyphotic thoracic curve, that means like kind of an excessive curve to the upper back, collapsing of the chest, this will help. This will improve that tone in the upper back. And then we can release and take a breath. Take a few breaths. So you can repeat that like every day. If you find that this is a challenging thing for you, I would repeat that. Do this for a week, every day for a little while, or more, a couple weeks, until you really start to feel that dynamic tone in the upper back. So what I was saying before is, if you tend to have forward head position, the shoulder blades tend to slide apart, the chest tends to collapse. That little exercise will tone the area around the shoulder blades and the whole upper back to help you maintain the head over the spine, which is all about the thoracic spine being upright. Okay, it does have a natural curve, but we don't want it to be excessive. So now let's take our belt, or a scarf, or even like a dish towel or something will work. And we're going to place that in our hands behind the back, shoulder width apart. Now, each person is going to have to figure this out for yourself. If you just take your hands straight back and grab this belt, but you find your elbows are bent, maybe your wrists are bent, then you need to take wider, right? So you're going to take your hands on this belt, however wide apart you need it to be, in order to fully straighten your elbows. So maybe that's here, maybe that's here, and maybe you will find that you can actually clasp your hands behind your back with the elbows straight. So what happens usually is when I demonstrate that, or somebody see that, everybody wants to try it. So it's fine to try it. If you clasp your hands behind your back and you cannot straighten the elbows, then you don't want to push forward, because you're going to injure something, right? You're going to stress out some aspect of your arm or shoulder. So please take that belt and do this with straight arms. And over time, you'll be able to clasp the hands. That means that the arms can extend, the shoulders can extend, and the chest can open. And notice here, the shoulder blades are really squeezing together. You get all of this with the belt. So do this with straight elbows. Your chest is opening, squeeze your shoulder blades together, and then you can play with taking the arms back. Now, if you start taking the arms back and you feel everything kind of kinking up, head going forward, elbows bending, take wider between the hands. Wider between the hands, and take those arms back. Feel the shoulder blades squeezing together. Chest is opening, and then release. So that's one that you can repeat. I would do that every day. In fact, I do that every day. I usually grab a dish towel. Even though I can clasp my hands behind my back, when I'm making tea in the morning, I'm waiting for that water to boil, I do a whole bunch of things at my kitchen counter, and that's one of them. Just take that dish towel and stretch it apart and stretch back. First thing in the morning, just really opens up the shoulders. So now, we're going to do another big favorite, and this is huge. This is so good for the shoulders. I take that belt and drop it down behind my head, right? So notice I'm not doing this. My elbow is facing forward, right? Not out to the side. So that might be a thing that you have to work on, is bringing that elbow in, right? So you may not even do the next part if this is really tight. You may just be working on this, is getting that arm to come up in this orientation. Then at hip level, take your other hand and find the belt. So the top hand is reaching as far back as it can, as if I'm trying to scratch between my shoulder blades or something, or wash my upper back like that. So in other words, I don't bring it forward. I keep letting that hand go as far down as it can, and the bottom hand is going to stretch the belt down. So you get this really wonderful opening through the side body and this opening of the shoulder joint. Now, if that's going well, then as this hand goes down, it can also go back. And you will probably see that my top hand is reaching back, not resting against my neck. It's resisting what's going on with the belt, that my bottom hand is pulling it down and away. And this really opens up your whole side of your rib cage. This is great for improving breathing. It's great for improving shoulder mobility. Okay, so then we're going to release. Let go and just let your arms hang and notice how different the two sides feel. And we'll go with the other side. So dropping that belt down at about hip level, you reach for your belt and you stretch it downward, which is going to, if your upper hand is resisting, that's going to bring the elbow back. You're going to feel some stretch through triceps, through your sides of your ribs. And if it goes well, then you can also not just stretch down, but back. And I'm just showing this from different angles so you can see what's going on. Notice I'm maintaining my Tadasana, so nothing going on weird with the head. And just breathe and let that open up. Good. And then we'll release that. You repeat that every day. It's a quick little thing. And you will really find that this helps to keep the shoulders open. If you don't ever do that action, and then one day you try it, you realize, wow, that changes fast. So really let that kind of become like a daily thing that you do to keep the shoulder range of motion nice and happy and smooth. So we know that the pose was with the hands in Namaste behind the back. So while that might not be accessible to you, there are some things that you can do. And one of them is just taking the hand back and clasping the hand around your elbow area. Now that might not work. You might find that you need to do this. So the elbow may be a little bent, and you grasp at the wrist, and then you can slowly begin over time to work your way up. All right, so this is something you can do when you're just hanging out, practicing, opening up the chest and seeing how far you can get that hand. Let's switch to the other side. So again, you could start at the wrist and then forearm and walk your way up. All right, and that pose that I started with the belt, with stretching the belt back with straight elbows will really help with this. So after these two, doing this on both sides, then you can try, can you hold your elbows behind your back? So again, the chest has to open up, the arms have to be able to move back, excuse me, and then you can see if you can catch the elbows. So there does happen to be two sides to this. So you can see I'm holding my elbows, and then this hand is going to go behind. Right? So there's this way, and then there's this way. So you just do both sides. In other words, you could grab your left elbow with your right hand, and then reach up with the left hand. And then you can switch, grab the elbow with your right elbow with your left hand, and then reach up. Good. Sometimes I do this when I'm walking. I just walk, and instead of swinging my arms, I might take the hands behind my back for a little bit, just to open the chest. Okay, so now for the biggie is the namaste behind the back. You can try it right in front of your chest. Where this tends to catch on me and makes it difficult, I mean, many people are just going to find right up from the starting block, it's the shoulder, but it's the side of the wrist. I don't make a huge practice of doing this pose all the time. I usually will do it with grabbing the elbows behind my back. But for those of you who may be maybe a little younger than me, and your shoulders and your wrists are feeling pretty flexible, and you may be like really excited about doing this, then I will show you how we get into it. You can bring the palms together, fingers pointing down, my thumbs are against my back, and then you can turn it so your fingertips are pointing right into your back, and then you kind of swoop onto the outside edge of your hand, right? And then I kind of sneak my way up, walking up. So some things that have to happen is for the palms to come together, the elbows have to be able to go back. The shoulders have to be able to go back. Remember that exercise we did laying on the floor? That's my shoulder blades moving into my rib cage so that my chest can open, my palms can come together, right? And then to undo, you just unfold them like that. It makes that sound too. Good. So let's try to pose with the hands behind the back. If you aren't ready for that, that's okay. You can use the chair. We're just going to repeat it one more time. You can use the chair under your hands, the blocks under your hands on a countertop, any of those options. I'm going to practice this holding my elbows. If you want to do namaste behind the back, then please feel free. So standing in Tadasana, feet parallel hip width apart. Let's take the arms back and hold the elbows, or hold the wrist, or palms together. Your choice, yogi's choice, right? And then I'm going to step the left foot back, anchor into that back foot, really activate my legs, reaching into the earth, pushing the earth down, and then as I draw the belly up against the lumbar spine, I'm drawing my abdominal organs firmly against my lumbar spine for support, for flexion. I'm not using my hands against anything on the floor, so I really want support for that lumbar spine. And you curl your torso forward over that front leg. Bringing the chin in, looking at the floor behind you, at the wall behind you, or back up into your own heart. This pose really draws us inward. Good. And then pushing into the floor, breathing in. We'll come up, step your back foot up, and release the hands. Take a breath, notice how that feels. And then we'll go to the other side. So because I'm grabbing my elbows, I'm going to switch the side that I did. If you're doing palms together, then that's symmetrical. If you're grabbing your wrist, which I didn't demonstrate, maybe I'll demonstrate that on this side, just grabbing the wrist behind the back. And we're going to step the right foot back. So if you did the wrist on the other side, you can switch hands, right? Anchor down through your back leg. Strong, stable, dynamic back leg. Draw the belly up into the back body. Support your lumbar spine with your abdominal organs. Curling forward. Release the base of the skull. Bring that chin in. Nice flexion from the tailbone all the way through the crown of the head. And breathing. When you're ready to come up, you push the floor down with your feet. Breathing in, up you go. Bend that front knee. Step the feet back together. And take a moment to observe. So thank you for joining me. That's Pārśvottānāsana. It's a wonderful pose for really keeping your hips and legs free, shoulders open, and kind of a bit of a restoring and refreshing pose for the nervous system. So thanks for joining me. Namaste.